Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello listeners. Tonight's story is going to take us to Edmonton, Alberta, and back to 2008. The disappearance of then 21-year-old Dylan Koshman has remained one of Edmonton's most haunting mysteries. Dylan, a young man who had moved to the city from nearby Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, vanished without a trace during the early morning hours on a Thanksgiving-long weekend. The story begins as a missing persons case, but after years of unanswered questions, it's only recently been reclassified as a homicide investigation. In this episode, Madeleine Klein and I are going to explore the chilling details of Dylan's disappearance and do our best to unravel the tangled web of events that surround the night. We're going to be talking about arguments between cousins, a late-night fight, and the many statements made by those closest to him. So let's get into it. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, we're going to be covering the disappearance and possible murder of Dylan Koshman.
Melanie Alex and her daughter Tara Koshman are trying to piece together what happened when Dylan Koshman disappeared.
Living this nightmare every day is not easy.
Year after year after year, Alex walks the Edmonton streets taping posters, hoping to scoop any leads on her son.
It's necessary because we need to keep Dylan's face and name out there still because there's no closure for us.
Koshman was last seen during the early morning of October 11, 2008, leaving his home in the South Edmonton area after getting into an argument with his roommates. He then disappeared without a trace.
Because we need answers, it's nobody just ups and vanishes.
It's why they continued their search, hoping that someone, someday, remembers something that could help them get one step closer to solving the mystery of Dylan's disappearance and bring him home.
Miss Madeleine Klein. We're back. We're going to be discussing a case not too far from icy cold Regina that you're in. Before we get to the case, though, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I can't believe we're damn near halfway through January and I've accomplished nothing.
Yeah, we're recording this on the 13th of January. The last 13 days has been a blip in time.
Yeah, just 13, 14 days ago, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be productive this year. So I still got 11 and a half months to
make up. Yeah.
to make up for it.
Good. But you've had a big 13 days so far this year. You're back to work after almost a year off on maternity leave. How's that
Over
going?
a year.
Over a year.
Yeah, I had 13 months off and it was the best 13 months of my life. But you know what? It's fine. It's nice to get into a little bit of a routine.
Mm-hmm.
So
well,
yeah,
enjoy it because it's the rest of your life.
Only 25 more years until sweet, sweet retirement.
That's the spirit. Well, we can turn off our own lives and get into the story. We're going to be discussing Dylan Koshman and his disappearance. Well, now I guess, I don't know if it's officially been declared a murder, but it's being investigated by a homicide division. So I guess we can say the presumed murder and disappearance of Dylan Koshman. It was you who recommended this story. Somehow this went completely over my head, despite CBC doing a Fifth Estate documentary about it. How did you learn about this case? Was it through CBC's documentary?
No, I have covered this case on TikTok before, about 3 years ago, give or take. But the first time I actually learned about it was on Facebook because Dylan is from Moose Jaw, and I actually know one of his family members.
Oh, really? Okay.
I want to say it's like a second cousin, but he'll share his missing poster, and so yeah, I talked to him and said I can cover Dylan's case, and he sent me over to Dylan's sister Tara, and I messaged her on Facebook, and then just made a 2-part TikTok.
Okay. So it just where you mentioned a connection, Dylan's originally from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, although the story takes place in Edmonton, he eventually moves from Moose Jaw to Edmonton. But how far is Moose Jaw from Regina? And Moose Jaw, unless I'm mistaken, would be a smaller town than Regina?
Oh yeah, it's only 45 minutes away.
Okay. All right.
I'm trying to think of something to say about Moose Jaw.
Do you have any, well, let me just ask this. Do you have anything good to say about it?
There's a spa there. There's a mineral spa there. And Wayne
Okay.
Gretzky used to go to it every year.
Well, a mineral spa is cool. That's like a
It is.
natural like spot where you can get in like warm water all year round. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I've actually never been there.
Okay. But okay.
Yeah, but it exists and it's very highly recommended, I guess.
I guess if you're if you're learning about Moose Jaw for Saskatchewan from this episode of this podcast, yes, it has a natural mineral reserve, and that's it.
And a giant moose.
That's right. All
That's
right.
like the landmark.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I've heard about this giant moose. It's like Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan has, I think it's like the largest moose statue or something, and it's at like the visitor or the tourist information center.
Yeah, and then wasn't there like a battle between here and somewhere in Sweden for the biggest
But,
moose or something? I
okay.
can't remember.
Okay. This seems like a job
Mm.
for Keep Canada Weird.
Yeah.
So
We'll
let's
circle back at Keep Canada Weird.
yes. So Dylan, again, born and raised Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, but eventually he leaves Moose Jaw for the big city of Edmonton, Alberta, the province next door. Would it be normal to make that kind of move? Like where I'm at in Nova Scotia, I grew up in small town Nova Scotia in Cape Breton, and it's very common to when once you're old enough to move out of your parents' house, you move to Halifax or maybe to Toronto or something. Is Edmonton your equivalent?
I would say Calgary is now. Everyone moves to Calgary, but this happened in 2008. So I'm wondering if at the time Edmonton was like the place to go. But
Mhm.
regardless, I think Edmonton and Calgary are like 45 minutes away from each
Yeah.
other.
Mhm.
So it's like damn near the same thing.
Yeah. And when 21-year-old Dylan leaves Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan for Edmonton, Alberta, he has connections in Edmonton. So that could be a part of it as well. He moves
Right.
there, of course, to be living in a bigger city. With that would come new experiences as well as work opportunities. But he has a connection there where he has an older cousin, Colin, who lives with Colin's brother, Dylan's other cousin, 23-year-old Nick. So he has his two older cousins who are living together there. And when Dylan leaves Moose Jaw, it's to go to Edmonton, live with his cousins, Colin and Nick, who are brothers, and find work. He ends up finding work as an apprentice pipe fitter. And again, that's cliche. Like everyone from the East Coast who goes out west, they're going out there to become pipe fitters.
I was gonna say.
Is Alberta all pipes?
Pretty much. Yeah, you go to Alberta to become a pipe fitter or work on a rig.
Yeah, we should talk a little bit about Dylan because that's something that comes up a lot in this story. There's going to be a lot of unknown, so it's tough to kind of fill in the blanks without knowing a little bit about the people. But by all accounts, Dylan Koshman was a great guy. He's said to have a great sense of humor, funny, caring, kind, life of the party guy, but at the same time could kind of be a shy guy. But it also seemed like, it's the type of person that everybody just enjoyed him. What was your take on Dylan from everything we read?
That's pretty much exactly what I got from it, even just by looking at his photo, which I'm sure is going to be our cover art. Like you can just tell he was just a nice guy. He was fun. I think like we've all been 21 at one point, and I think we've all known a guy like Dylan, and you get this good vibe from him.
Yeah. We should address the elephant in the room as well. Since you mentioned the cover art, he may be the most handsome guy from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Like from Moose Jaw, yes.
He looks the photos that I found and the photo that I used on this cover art, it looks like he looks like a model or something, like a very good looking guy.
Very well have been a model.
Mm-hmm.
He almost looks like a 90s boy band guy.
Yeah, he has that look. He looks, well, he was 21 at the time of this happening. Young, healthy, full of life, working as an apprentice pipe fitter with an entire life ahead of him. And that's what will make this story, well, one of the reasons this story is so tragic. There's a few. One is the presumed early loss of Dylan's life. But the fact that this happens completely isolated within one family, as we'll hear, unlike any other story, it's all like everybody involved in it is so closely connected before and after Dylan's disappearance. So let's talk a little bit about the situation in Edmonton, Alberta. So again, Dylan moves there to live with his cousins, the brothers Colin, who is 30, and Nick, who is 23. Dylan is only there for a few months before things turn sour, and we'll talk a bit about what leads to them turning sour and how that kind of manifests itself. But I want to start with a theory: is Dylan's 21, his cousin Colin's 30 that he's living with. When I was 30, I would not want to be living with a 21-year-old. It's two very different lifestyles that would conflict with each other, I would think.
You would think, but you never know. You never know how some people are, because like I am 31 and living with a 21 or 22-year-old is the definition of a nightmare for me.
I don't even like being around them. I consider them teenagers. They're unpredictable. Yeah. They're loud. They don't do the dishes, I'm sure. That's immediately where my mind went, is that it seems like tensions form within the house around one thing is Dylan always has people over, primarily his girlfriend Erin. She's all but lives at the house, was staying there most nights, and that led Colin, the older cousin, the 30-year-old, to kind of start to lean on Dylan a bit, being like, if she's going to be staying here all the time, you should be paying more rent than the other two. And it seems like rent becomes, in Dylan's share of the rent, sort of becomes an issue in the house very quickly, and it escalates to the point of just being kind of a toxic situation within that house.
And like, I have been kind of in that situation, but I was the girlfriend. I can understand both sides. But like, I will guarantee you that they were just hanging out in his room, and she might have slept there, but like, it's not like she has a whole other room.
Yeah.
And like, maybe she showered there every now and then.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We'd only be guessing, but I can also see a situation where, imagine they didn't have a dishwasher. And I think nothing makes roommates hate each other more than a situation where there's no dishwasher. Like, it's not going to work out.
That sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, I lived in a shared house with like 3 or 4 other guys, and we didn't have a dishwasher. We were like best friends when we moved in together. About a month later, we were at each other's throats daily over the dish.
Oh,
the dishwasher situation.
If you want to lose a friend, move in with them.
Yeah, seriously. Well, in this case, it's 3 cousins. 2 of them are brothers. Then they have their cousin there. Good friends can fight it out and then make up, but family definitely should be able to do that. In this case, it seemed like this brooding problem in the house, to the point that Dylan was already, after only months of living there with his 2 cousins, was already thinking about moving out and getting a separate place, either with his girlfriend Erin or on his own. But of course, even in 2008, rent was high in a city like Edmonton, and just starting out in that city to get your own bachelor apartment was going to be a big deal. So that wasn't something that was going to happen within days. But there would be a straw that breaks the camel's back in this situation, and it's pretty unexpected, although it kind of fits the trajectory that this has been taken. What is it that sets this all off?
So Colin was already like not happy, and then Dylan invited his cousin Cameron down for the weekend, and that was just, as you put it, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, Dylan was said to be like kind of homesick a little bit, and he had another cousin named Cameron who was back in Saskatchewan, and Dylan invited Cameron to come stay with them all in Edmonton for, the Thanksgiving weekend, for the long weekend. So I can only assume this would have been a weekend of partying amongst these 4 cousins. So it's 4 cousins together. But Colin, the 30-year-old cousin who lived in the apartment that was already having a hard time with Dylan having his girlfriend there so often, Colin did not want Cameron to come. It was too many people in the house. He didn't want him to visit. Dylan invited him anyway, and it was pretty much as soon as Cameron arrived, the 4th cousin, 1 cousin too many, that Colin told Dylan, like, this is it. The end of the month, you're out of here. Like, this is too much. He referred to it as giving him an eviction notice, but Colin told Dylan at the end of the month, you're out of here.
I wonder if this was before or after they started drinking.
This, I think, was early in the day.
Oh, okay.
Cameron, I believe, shows up early in the day. Colin gives Dylan the eviction notice, like, you be out by the end of the month. And then they start drinking. And it seems like this entire group of 4 cousins drink throughout the day and into the night, but they do it separately. Colin, the 30-year-old, is off with friends at like a bar or something somewhere drinking. While back at the house, you have 21-year-old Dylan. You have Colin's younger brother, the other cousin, Nick. You have Cameron, who's up visiting for the weekend, and you have Nick's girlfriend. The four of them are back at the house just drinking, and of course there's an odd mood in the air because earlier in the day Colin had told Dylan, "You're out of here by the end of the month." But what ends up happening is while they're all there drinking, Nick, the younger brother of Colin, alleges that he heard Dylan and Cameron talking about jumping Colin when he gets back from the bar in response to giving Dylan this eviction notice. But Nick doesn't just let that go in one ear and out the other. He texts Colin, and I think that's what really gets things cooking.
See, I would love to know the direct quote. So, like, where Dylan was obviously angry, and I would have been too. But like, were they just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna kick his ass? Or like, did they say, yeah, like, let's jump him when he comes home?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. How did Nick perceive this is my question.
It's true. And there's, when people are drinking and things get foggy, even something you say you don't necessarily mean.
No.
But I don't know. I think either way, I imagine this was one of those situations where it was tension you could cut with a knife. You add some alcohol in there and a long day of drinking it. It's, things get weird. You and I together have talked about many cases where alcohol has made people violent and ridiculous. And maybe that's what happens here. But as we get through it, I think it's a lot of people who hear this story will have one particular person they point their finger at and blame. But I don't know. I've been going back and forth all day and since I've been reading about this case, about who's responsible or what may have happened. It's a true whodunit. But let's get into it. So Colin, the 30-year-old cousin who wants Dylan out of the house, is at the bar. He gets this message from his younger brother saying that Dylan, who he just told to get out of the house by the end of the month, was going to beat him up when he gets home. Colin makes his way back home, and he arrives home just around midnight. There's now 5 of them in the house. Again, there's 30-year-old Colin and his brother Nick, who had already texted him. We have Nick's girlfriend who's there. Then we have Dylan and Cameron, who's visiting for the weekend. So the 5 of them are in the house when this happens. And as soon as Colin gets in the house, it's not that the fight starts, but an argument starts between Dylan and Colin over the eviction and over, are you saying you're going to beat me up? You don't need to use your imagination too hard to imagine this conversation between a bunch of drunk guys.
Oh, and like you just know Colin didn't walk in calmly. He rolled up and was like, "What's happening?"
He's and he's the alpha. He's 30 years old, so he has to be the alpha in this situation. Yeah. Like a 30-year-old with a 21-year-old. I can imagine how this all plays out because I've seen things like this play out in real life.
It's a tale as old as time.
Yeah, but this confrontation starts just after midnight with arguing, and it begins to slowly escalate, leading to, it escalates from arguing to getting physical, to pushing, to punching, to Colin telling Dylan, like, you're out of here, not at the end of the month, like, you're out now, like, you get out of this place and never come back. It's around 4 a.m. when things really hit their fever pitch. And I guess we can get a sense of what happens by listening to one of the 2 911 calls that came in. 2 911 calls came in right around the same time, just before 4 a.m., early the morning of October 11th, right around the time that Dylan will last be seen. I'll play the first of 2 calls, and it may be a little hard to make out, but what you'll get a sense of here is that the 911 caller is describing absolute madness happening at their neighbor's house. Here it comes.
Edmonton Police Service.
Hello?
Hello?
I was calling with a public disturbance. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. There's a bunch of guys in hiding.
Okay. And you don't know if there's any weapons involved?
I have no idea what these guys. They're going crazy. They're just crazy.
Okay.
Knowing they totally went nuts.
How old are they?
25, 30, I don't know.
Okay, I'll put a call in.
So that ends with the 911 operator saying, I'll put a call in. And for anyone who couldn't make it out well, what the caller is saying is, I want to report a public disturbance. My neighbors, there's a bunch of guys fighting. They're going nuts. They're just nuts is the way he describes it. And he described them as being about 25 to 30 years old. Another call came in right around the same time from another neighbor saying that they believed there was people beating somebody up, as if it was like multiple people beating up one guy, but ultimately reporting the same kind of thing, a fight going on in this yard of this house. Because it starts inside the house, but at some point makes its way outside and then back in, and it's,
and like
crazy.
And we can just like mentally picture it, because I'm sure we've all experienced something like that. Maybe not like in the fight, but we've all seen something like this.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've watched the show Cops and Jerry Springer. I think it's something like in the middle between all these, because it's a bunch of cousins,
right,
who are drinking, and it's late at night, like 4 a.m. If you're shouting at 4 a.m, you just got to go to bed. These guys all should have went to bed.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
they should have gone to. They should have gone to bed 3 hours prior.
Yeah, but anyway, the calls occur just about 4 a.m. Those 911 calls come. We heard the 911 operator say, I'll put a call in. That is maybe not as powerful as it sounds, because when he puts a call in, the police do respond, but they don't show up for hours later. When they do show up, they knock on the door and there's no answer, so they just leave.
They're like, it seems to have fixed itself.
Yeah, that was easy. Back to the coffee shop. It's like a Kids in the Hall sketch.
It has been alleged to me that the Edmonton Police Service are some of the worst police out there. Like, they're just, mind you, everyone says that about the police in their city, but I've had a lot of people be like, Edmonton police are literally the worst.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, in this case, we have, so far in this story, the only interaction the police have is they receive 2 911 calls about a fight outside. They show up hours later, which, that's one problem. If there's violence happening and you show up hours later, of course the person's like, whoever lost that fight, if it continued, they're long since dead. Yeah. Or what, it's no one's there, so they leave. So far you could say their response time was too slow, and I don't know, if someone calls the cops because of a fight, it's not like the cops are going to get like a warrant to search the house or something. No. So I think so far the only criticism against them is how long it took them to show up. But when we get further into the story, we'll circle back to this, because in totality, when we hear this story, I think there is definitely some justifiable criticism from the Edmonton police through this story.
I also think they didn't try very hard. I think they knocked and then they were like, oh, no one's answering. Let's go.
Yeah, well, we'll hear more about what the Edmonton police did and didn't do, and when they chose to do it, because I guess the theme of their response to Dylan's disappearance is going to be tardiness. You'll see. That'll be the theme of it. So we need to back up a little bit to what actually happened, because we kind of got sidetracked there by following along with the 911 response and the police response. But what actually is said to have happened, there are multiple statements made. Everyone in this house will eventually go on to give a statement to the police that are all pretty similar. Like, for the most part, their stories are lining up. And that is that the fight happened in the house, made its way outside and back in. It is said by Colin's younger brother, Nick, that Nick seemed to be trying to restrain Dylan while Dylan was trying to punch Colin. So that's one aspect of it. But what the people in the house seem to agree on is that the fight ends with Colin telling Dylan to get out of the house. I don't want you living here. Not till the end of the month, not till any time after now. Get out and leave. And Dylan walks out the back door of the house, wearing only his jeans, sneakers, and a t-shirt. And it's, the temperatures that night were below freezing. This is October in Edmonton. It was just below zero that night. So it was a cold night. And he walked out the back door of the house. And that is everybody's story of when Dylan was last seen. And I will say, Now we're recording this in 2025. Dylan has not been seen or heard from since that moment that they allege he walked out the back door as this fight ends.
Like, this is a case that it's one of two things. Either one or all of the cousins, obviously something happened, whether it was an accident or whatever, and they all seem to get their story straight and, keep it simple, stupid. Or they just have really terrible luck, and Dylan did just leave, but was like somehow never found. And this is where more questions come up. So it's like, okay, fine. Let's say he storms off. If he were to, like, they weren't in the middle of nowhere, they were in the city. So if he were,
they're in Edmonton.
If he were to like succumb to the elements, they would have found him. Or
there's not like a remote logging camp or something like he.
Or did he, did he storm off and run into another group of, terrible people and something awful happened? Or like, it's just like none of it makes sense.
Yeah. And that's why we kind of have to examine every piece of everything that happens later, because we're left with the possibilities that the cousins did something to him and are covering it up. Because if one of them did it, they were all there, so they would all be in on it and needing to cover it up together. So that's one option. Another possible outcome is that Dylan left and either died by self-harm or succumbed to the elements or something of that nature. And then the other option would be that Dylan was, like you just said, ran into some other evildoers and they swept him away and did something horrible to him. I think the third option of, someone else doing it, what are the chances that the night you get in this violent fight with your cousins and thrown out of your place that you manage to run into some serial killer or someone tries to rob the guy, with a t-shirt and probably a bloody nose? Because if he just had a fight, I'm assuming he had at least a bloody nose or something.
You'd think. Or, some sort of cut, scrape.
Something. And either way, it's a cold night. He's in his t-shirt. He's gonna stand out because he's gonna look like a crazy person.
Yeah.
If you're walking down a street at night and it's cold, you're bundled up in your jacket, and you see someone coming towards you in a t-shirt, breathing heavy because they just got in a fight, I'd be like, whoa, I'm staying away from this guy.
I'm from Regina, so that's just like a normal thing.
Hey, Mark. He's just freaking out tonight?
Seriously.
The only physical evidence left behind from Dylan would turn up, I think, a day later. They found his wallet in the neighbor's yard. So I think literally one house away, his wallet with his ID and his bank card was found in that yard the next day. But not really any evidentiary value to it because his bank accounts were never touched. No social media was ever there was literally no sign of Dylan from the time of those 911 calls. But we can talk about what happened leading up to the 911 calls with Dylan and what happened over the following days. And we can look at that to see if any of this gives us any information on what may have happened.
But just one more thing, piggybacking off of the wallet. So, and we'll kind of get into this in a little bit, but they found the wallet because police eventually did come out and they brought police dogs. And I believe the police dogs sniffed this wallet out. So that means that the police dogs didn't get a scent of anything else. So his blood wasn't on the lawn or, that's what I gathered from it. If there was a fight, there was no blood, evidence on the lawn at least.
But even if there was, because one other thing they found in the house, this was I think an aunt or a relative found a roll of paper towels that had a bunch of blood on it within the apartment. And the police were told about this and took it, but the police said it didn't progress the investigation. And the way, when I was thinking about that, how couldn't it? I was thinking if obviously they got in a fight, everybody is admitting that, and they say Dylan walked off. But if there was, even if Dylan's blood was in the house, it wouldn't change the case because he bled during the fight. So even if these police dogs found some blood on the step, it wouldn't be a surprise. It was a big fight between drunk 20 to 30-year-olds.
That's true.
That went on for a long period of time. So it's going to take more than finding blood in the house unless, of course, it's a different story if you find a significant amount.
Right.
But drops of blood wouldn't really change anything. But let's take a short ad break, and then we'll continue the story by looking into Dylan's behavior leading up to his disappearance and everyone else's behavior in the days after. So let's start by going through some of Dylan's activities leading up to his disappearance, because I think this will help give us a sense of exactly when whatever happened could have happened. And we'll start by looking at his communication on his cell phone, because I think maybe this is telling. In the lead up to the fight, throughout the night, he was pretty much in constant contact with his girlfriend, Erin. His girlfriend, Erin, was like at a bar somewhere with friends, I believe. But throughout the night, they were texting back and forth, and it was this sort of like vague, again, as I mentioned, she stayed at his place most nights. So there was this sort of vague, like, yeah, I may show up there later. They were texting throughout the night. When Erin was getting ready to leave her friends and go home for the night, she called Dylan at just about 3:30, and there was no answer. She assumed he went to bed. She went, to her own place and went to sleep. So according to that says whatever happened would have been like he was at least around until 3:30 based on his exchanges with her. 3:30 is when she loses contact and he doesn't answer the call. But right around that same time, just after 3:30, Dylan sends a message to his brother. And this one's interesting.
It was on MSN Messenger, which really dates this story.
Yeah, seriously. These guys were hanging on to Messenger to the bitter end.
But yeah, so Dylan gets onto his desktop or a desktop and messages his brother Derek asking for his phone number.
He must not have known his brother's number.
Yeah, maybe he was, you always had a friend that constantly had a new phone. So maybe it was kind of like that.
I guess I don't know my brother's number, but I guess now in 2025 it's a different thing. I don't know anybody's number.
That's true. Anyway.
Yeah, I think you were about to say the time. When was it that he would send that message? Do you have a better idea?
I think it was about 3:30.
Yeah.
So
okay, I thought so as well. So at 3:30 in the night, if you're writing your brother saying like, what is your number? It's already out of control in that house. That's what that tells me.
Yeah.
I need to get out of here. I need you to talk someone off the ledge. I think, we'll just keep that in the back of our mind. See if this tells us anything as we learn a bit more. But that's really it in the lead up to the 911 calls. The texts with Erin, not answering his phone just after 3:30 when she calls, writing his brother, who's back in Saskatchewan, I believe, for his phone number. The police come hours later after the 911 calls. No one's home, so they leave. And that's it for the night of Friday, October 10th into Saturday, October 11th. But that morning when Erin wakes up, his girlfriend, it's her that really starts this. She's calling Dylan, texting him, trying to get in touch with Dylan, and it's out of character for him to not be responding. And it seems like she's the one who begins to get worried and try to make something happen.
If it would just be weird for anyone to not answer at all, especially if they probably had plans that day to just hang out at the very least.
Well, what she said herself is that they were together all the time. Like, it would be weird for her to not stay there. It would definitely be weird for her not stay there and not be able to get in touch with him the next day.
Right. And so she would call his cell phone, and then when she couldn't get a hold of him on his phone, she would call the house phone, which also dates this story.
Yeah, and the house phone leads her to Dylan's cousin, Colin. When Erin gets in touch with Colin, Colin tells her, yeah, Dylan's not home. And Erin wants to come to the house to like collect some of her things. There must have been something there that she wanted, because it's notable that she wanted to go to the house to grab some stuff and Colin refused. And don't come here. You can't come in.
Which is so weird. Like, that's a red flag right there. Like, I get you don't like the girl, but why don't you want her at the house?
So one reason is Colin doesn't want her to come to the house because he's covering up a murder. There's blood everywhere and he has to clean it up, so he doesn't want the victim's girlfriend to come over. The other possibility would be that he just had the fight of his life as far as argument with his cousin. He kicked his cousin out and his cousin's dead to him. And the last thing he wants is his cousin's girlfriend coming here and, and just getting this going. Like, I could see a situation where Colin's like, no, you're not coming here today. Like, I'm done with you. I'm done with Dylan after last
And
night.
she was kind of the focal point of the tension.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I can see it both ways. And that's the thing with the story. I'll just say it now. If you read online about this, the majority of the people following the story are outspoken in their belief that Colin did it. But I think if you allow yourself to look at every piece of information, there is a scenario that you can kind of explain his behaviors. I'm not saying he didn't do it, but I'm just trying to think as we go of a situation where Colin would act the way he is that doesn't involve him covering up a murder.
Right.
And that's what I thought about this specific reason that he doesn't allow her to come in. Maybe he's just still mad and doesn't want to deal with it. And maybe he hates her guts and doesn't want to see her.
True. And like I said before, either he had something to do with Dylan's disappearance or he has terrible luck. Because things aren't looking good for you, Colin.
Oh, yeah. If Colin didn't do this, he is the unluckiest guy in the world. If Colin didn't do this, there is a God, and God is trying to frame him for murder.
Yes. So.
Yes. So Erin's concerned. She can't reach Dylan. Colin won't let her in the house to grab her stuff. She begins worrying, rightfully so. And what she does is she starts calling local hospitals to see if maybe he got injured and he was in the hospital. She's calling police stations to see if maybe he got arrested, but she cannot trace him down anywhere. And that seems to go on for like a day or two. Of course, this is Thanksgiving weekend, so it's during a long weekend, it's a little harder to make things happen, but she cannot find him, but her belief is that she's out there either arrested or injured. But it seemed when she called the police station to see if maybe he got arrested, it seemed like she couldn't really get a straight answer. It was kind of like, we can't give that information.
Right.
So it seemed like the police maybe couldn't say like yes or no.
Well, at one point you run out of hospitals to call, and then if the police can't release information, you're kind of stuck like, okay, so he's not in the hospital, but he might be in cells, but I don't know. Like, what do you do? Where do you go from there?
Mm-hmm. Well, what she does is she waits till Tuesday, which is like 3 days after it happened. Dylan's supposed to go to work. He's supposed to work on Tuesday, which is the 14th of October. When Dylan doesn't show up for work, that's when Erin, his girlfriend, really gets into a panic. And what she does is she goes to Dylan's brother back in Saskatchewan. She contacts Derek and lets Derek know that I haven't seen Dylan for days. Colin's not letting me in the house. Dylan didn't show up for work. Something's wrong. And it really starts to escalate from there because it involves Dylan's brother Derek. From there, Erin and Derek contact Dylan's mother. So now she knows. And it's the next day, Wednesday, the 15th of October, that Dylan's mother begins the process of filing a missing persons report, about 5 days later. But even this doesn't go easy. Shortly after this, we can start criticizing the Edmonton police again. But so far, we're only mad at them for showing up so late after the 911 call. But tell me about when Dylan's mom tries to make the missing persons report.
So she's unable to file a report because she lives in Moose Jaw. I guess you can't file a missing persons report if you're not in the same province as someone.
Why would that be that? To me, that's crazy.
I have no idea. I don't work there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds weird to me as well. But
yeah, so
another red flag is coming up.
Yeah, so Dylan's mom is back in Saskatchewan. When she calls, they're just like, no, like we need it from somebody in the city, that's just so weird. Like so many people would be filing missing persons reports on, their kids or their parents or whatever who they haven't heard from that are in another city, and the cops show up at the house and knock on the door and do a wellness check. But in this case,
I would have
yeah, maybe that's normal.
I would
But
have hung up the phone, called back, and been like, "Yeah, hi, I'm just calling from Edmonton. I want to report someone missing."
yes, hello, I'm a local resident of your city,
Yeah.
and I have an issue. Yeah, oh, absolutely, I would have. But and again, this is strike two against the Edmonton police. But what Dylan's mom does is she contacts somebody who is in the city and asks them to do it. Colin, the 30-year-old roommate of Dylan, one of the last person to see him while they were fighting, and she asks Colin to file the missing
no.
persons report.
She doesn't ask, she tells.
Yeah.
She says, "You have to report him missing. I can't, and he's been gone for
Yeah.
X amount of days. So you have to."
Yeah, and this is her nephew. So Dylan's
Right.
mom is calling her nephew Colin to say, like, we can't find him. You do it. Call
Yeah.
the police, file the missing persons report, and he agrees to do it.
But he doesn't.
As it turns out, he didn't. And so now, remember, I had just said I'm going to try to find. I'm trying to give a benefit of a doubt to Colin in this and try to at least find a way to justify the things he did. I cannot understand a reason why he wouldn't file a missing persons report. Even if I was mad at my cousin and I didn't want to live with them and they owed me rent money and they called me a bad name and punched me, if they were missing for 5 days, and their mother, my aunt, asked me, I would at least file the missing persons report.
Like, at what point do you get over it and start to worry about your cousin, loved one, whatever?
Probably before the point that your aunt calls you asking you to file a missing persons report. You don't get that call often.
No. And
Mhm.
yeah, see, like, this is the part where, because I too tried to, give Colin the benefit of the doubt, but this may not be the nail that nailed the coffin shut for me, but like, it's getting there.
And again, just talking it out, I see if Colin did it, if Colin killed him and they're covering it up, when Dylan's mom calls and tells you to file the missing persons report, it's at that point that you have to say, like, all right, I'm going to have to try to lie my way out of this. I'm going to look like I'm hiding it if I don't file the missing persons report.
Right.
So I think if you did it, you would file the missing persons report and try to see if you can get away with it. I think not filing it, like, if he did it, is that like could it be that he thinks, like, no, I just won't file it. She'll go away. She'll forget about her son. Like, that problem's not going to go away.
There are really stupid people out there. So you never know. I don't know this guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But, people, there are some people that just aren't very smart.
Yeah. I just can't understand why he wouldn't file it. But regardless, he didn't file it. It ends up being Dylan's girlfriend, Erin, who calls the police and files the missing persons report 5 days after he was last seen. So the police are already 5 days behind finding the missing 21-year-old man who left at about 4 a.m. after a fight in below zero temperature, wearing a t-shirt, jeans, shoes, without his wallet or his phone. He did, and I don't know if I said that already. He didn't have his phone. There was no activity on anything after his disappearance. And the police, from the very beginning, when the first 911 call came in, they didn't show up right away. When Dylan's mom called to report it, they weren't that interested in hearing from her. And when it comes to the actual search, it doesn't seem like they're giving that much of a shot either. It ends up being Dylan's family, like his parents from Saskatchewan. They make their way to Edmonton. Friends and family within Edmonton all band together and form a kind of a home base and begin searching. It's more so a civilian search than it is like a professional police search. But there is one person missing from the civilian search. Colin was busy.
He went skydiving instead
Yes,
of helping his family search for his missing cousin.
Yes. So when the original searches, when everybody was there searching, yes, Colin didn't take part as he was skydiving. Which, is that a red flag? It's so weird that maybe it isn't. I don't know.
No, it is. It's red flag number, what, 3 or 4 now?
Mm-hmm.
Like, fake it till you make it, man. You're not doing yourself any favors here.
Yeah, if he did it, this is the part of the story where he goes on the news pretending to cry and asks for people to help find his cousin.
Right?
Yeah,
You-
not like just dodges it. So I find that interesting, but this is where the search is happening. And I had already mentioned during the search, or you had mentioned, the police dogs found his wallet in the house next door's yard. It was Dylan's aunt who found a bloody roll of paper towel in the house that police deemed not to be significant. But they didn't really say, is it Dylan's blood or someone else's? But again, for the reasons I said, it's not the smoking gun you may think.
But I also think this could be lackluster police work.
Oh my, yeah.
Like they could have, I don't know, tested it, done something.
hmm But
Like
but again,
you have nothing. You have nothing to go on. Take the
I thought
roll
that, but
of bloody paper towel.
yeah, but let's say you do, and it shows up as it's Colin's blood, and he's like, "Yeah, I got punched in the face, my nose is bleeding, I used that." Or if
Okay.
it's Dylan's blood,
Well, then
If-
that's where it leads.
but what if it's Dylan's blood, and it's like, well, maybe when he got punched, it was bleeding, and like it's just unless you found like a knife with blood, you're like, whoa, you said a fight, you didn't say stabbing, but a paper towel with some blood.
I
I'm not saying
It's
it's
hard
like
to
this
say.
useless thing, but I think like it's not like, whoa, like we got a murder on our hands.
No, you're right. But
And I'm
still.
sure the cops were like, put that in a bag and take that out of here. But they weren't like,
You've
this
got a lot of
isn't a
faith
missing.
in the Edmonton police because I don't even think they did that.
One of them like grabbed a roll, blew his nose, and
They like tossed it behind him. He's like, "This is nothing."
yeah.
Next.
Yeah. But regardless, they weren't investigating this as a murder. They were investigating this as an unexplained absence, or what we would call a missing persons case. Despite everything else, and this is a criticism I think a logical criticism is that a report of a missing person who disappears immediately after 2 911 calls reporting like fights, someone beating up someone, screaming, they're going crazy. It's not a regular missing persons case. It's not that Dylan didn't come home. He disappeared in the middle of this violent thing happening. I'm surprised that the police didn't handle it as a possible homicide from the beginning.
Well, that's what I'm thinking too. Like there was obviously like a physical altercation. And, unfortunately, people accidentally get killed in bar fights all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
And that's immediately where my mind went. Like maybe there wasn't a bunch of blood. Maybe he just got punched in the head the wrong way and that was that.
And that does happen.
Oh, way more often than you
more
think.
More common than people think. And of course, the police interviewed everybody in the house, and for the most part, their stories lined up. So I think it would be unusual for, all of these people. It's 3 cousins and one of their girlfriends all saw it and all had, for the most part, the same story: is that there was a fight, there was no murder or anything like that. So it's maybe where that all checks out. Like I think it would be unlikely that they would all lie, but
And that's the thing. They say 3 people can keep a secret if 2 are dead. Like there's no way that these 4 young people can all get together and get their story straight and no one break away from the story that they decided was, I don't know.
Normally, like when you hear of a story where, this murder happens and several people are in on the cover up, years later, relationships change. One's not friends with the other and they go to the police and say what happened. That happens a lot. But in this case, they're all family. So it's like they're kind of together for life anyway. So I wonder if that could change the possibility that someone comes forward years later. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. So the police search happens, the civilian search happens. They find no trace of Dylan. And that's pretty much the end of it as far as developments go. So we're you could look at a month after his disappearance and there's not really any significant developments to declare until years later. Now, this is another strike against the Edmonton police. I had mentioned earlier in this episode, CBC did an episode of Fifth Estate, like a documentary series covering Dylan Koshman's disappearance. And it was actually the CBC producers reaching out to the Edmonton police and getting some attention on this case that leads the Edmonton police to take a second look at it and actually say, this is being handed off to our homicide department. It was CBC staff that told Dylan's family that it's being investigated now as a homicide. So it's very
you
clearly
guys.
like, yeah, it's like it's gone away. So whatever. And they look at it again. They're like, oh, shoot. Like, whoa, we got to take this seriously. CBC's calling about this one.
Almost 10
That's
years
how-
later.
That's
they
how
were
it comes
like,
across.
"Oh." That's exactly how it comes across.
Mhm.
And it's just, and like we kind of already said this before, but like just with all the elements, how was this not looked into as a homicide earlier?
Yeah.
Like it's like I get there's not a smoking gun, there's not really any evidence, but just the details we do know isn't an unexplained absence.
Yeah. And I can understand investigating it as a missing persons case for maybe a couple weeks after
Right.
the events. But when 6 months later, there's no bank activity, no social media activity, this 21-year-old guy has completely disappeared after this violent event, he's probably still missing. Like, what did they think? He fled to start a new life somewhere without his jacket or phone?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you think he just like went to Thailand and started a new life without telling his family? Like, the kid was
yeah, it doesn't-
homesick, for God's sakes. Like,
Yeah, it doesn't check out. And I think not declaring or not investigating this as a homicide, 6 months later, a year later, nah, that is just the
Negligence.
police getting the way with it and forgetting about this case. And when CBC starts calling, they're almost in damage control. Like, quick, schedule a press conference. This is probably a homicide.
yeah. Well, and you never know. Maybe the lackluster police work is why whoever did this got away with it so easily. They were like, well, no one's sniffing around, so just don't say anything and it'll go away.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see, like, I'm sure like a reporter could get access to this kind of thing through like freedom of information requests or whatever. But it would be interesting to see the internal conversation within the Edmonton police about passing it on to the homicide department. Like, what led them to be like, because if they don't have a significant development that makes them do that, if they are doing it just because CBC has interest in the case, oh man, heads should roll.
Well, and also we kind of brushed over this fourth or fifth red flag. So while the police were interviewing or having a meeting with the family, I should say, I'm not sure if interviews ever really went on.
Yeah.
But
and is it what you're talking about is a meeting with the whole family together?
Yes. And during this meeting, Colin speculated to police that Dylan could have been killed. And he said, like it's Edmonton, like lots of people go missing here and they're dumped on construction sites.
Pretty dark statement to
What?
make. Yeah. In the CBC special, Dylan's mom recounted the experience of hearing him say that.
Colin stood in the background and he goes, well, this is Edmonton and people go missing all the time and bodies could be dumped in construction sites. And like, I'm sorry, but right now I've got goosebumps again. And I'm thinking, we all, even the police officer, we turned and we looked at Colin like, because like I said, at that point we were hoping and still believing we were going to find him alive. And I'm thinking, if you're even thinking that way, how could you have not gotten involved earlier?
Dark and specific.
Very. And I didn't realize Edmonton's reputation for missing persons cases. They get about 1,500 missing persons cases a year.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of missing persons.
It must be, right? Of course, the majority are solved, but 1,500, that's a big number. So
Yeah.
in a way, you can see why the initial response, of this nonchalance about the case. You got a bunch of drunk guys, young guys. I can see why the next day they weren't like, all hands on deck, let's find this guy. If there's that much of it going on, I can't imagine the police force has enough investigators handling missing persons cases to adequately take on 1,500. But yeah, it's dark.
I think it was mishandled from the beginning, though.
Yeah. As far as developments, everything we said so far is mainly what's known about the story. The only other thing we didn't mention, I just want to just touch on this because it's something that kind of nagged at me. So 30-year-old Colin is the one who's most often pointed at as being responsible, or people speculating he's responsible. And that is because it was Colin that was in the fight with Dylan. It was Colin that was kicking Dylan out. It was Colin who came home from the bar and this whole thing started. But Colin's younger brother, Nick, the one who was in the house who allegedly overheard Dylan and Cameron, the other cousin, planning to beat up Colin when he got home, Colin gave an interesting statement. It was a written statement he gave to Dylan's, I don't know if it was to Dylan's mom or Dylan's aunt. He wrote it shortly after this all happened, and he wrote it at their request because they didn't want him to forget any details. So they said, write down everything you remember about that night, Nick. And in Nick's statement that he wrote for that purpose, he described the fight between his older brother Colin and Dylan. And he said, like, they were on the ground punching each other, and I left where they were fighting. I went to the kitchen to get a drink, and when I came back, Dylan was already gone. He barged out the back door, so I didn't see him leave. And I couldn't, like, when I heard that statement, I'm like, that has to be bullshit, because there's nobody who would be seeing like their cousins fist fighting and rolling around and be like, I'm going to walk away for a minute.
I'm going to get a drink. Yeah,
that doesn't happen. I can't imagine that happening. But I don't believe Colin and Dylan were alone when Dylan left. I believe that either like Nick's girlfriend or the other cousin in the house, Cameron, was there when Dylan actually left. But I couldn't, in going through all the various statements I found, I couldn't find definitively who was said to have been there and seen Dylan walk out the back door of the house and leave. But I would be interested to find that out. But I do find it interesting that Nick at least says he walked away from this fight to get a drink. And that just seems weird. I've never seen someone do that.
No. Well, and yeah, that just adds another layer of weirdness onto this case.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know. I think it's one of those cases that, like you said, it's just going to take one of the few people that were there to, and it's been like 16 years now, over 16 years. And someone's just got to wake up one morning and be like, you know what? I'm going to report what I know.
Yeah.
Like,
but it's the fact that it's all family, though. I think that changes it. And even Dylan's parents, I saw them interviewed on CBC's Fifth Estate special about Dylan's disappearance. They have a hard time believing that Colin and Nick and possibly Cameron could have been involved in this in any way. They don't believe that these guys did it. And I don't know how, like, that would be very hard to, if it was my son that went missing, I would be very suspicious of the last three people who were with him during the fight before his disappearance. It seems like his parents are, I don't know if I would use the word supportive of Colin, but I don't believe, at least they're publicly stating they think he did it.
Gets the hold of them, and they actually do.
We showed Dylan's parents, Dan and Melanie, what Bill Clark had to say about now investigating their son's disappearance as a homicide.
I mean, let's face it, any homicide investigation, we're looking at the last people who saw that person alive. Who is it? It's people close to this family. You know, it's cousins of this family. We're going to be looking at them, absolutely.
When we last spoke, you and Tara and Derek were quite clear that you did not believe that a family member was involved in that way. When you see that, does it change your mind?
Because I don't want it to be any relative that would harm another person, but I'm scared. I'm scared for everybody. I want to find Dylan. I want to find out what happened to him. But it's going to hurt so many people.
Dan, have you had second thoughts about that?
No, that doesn't change my mind at all. I don't believe that they had anything to do with it, no.
Oh yeah, no. Well, and they don't want to believe that family would ever do that to family.
Is there any other case this reminds you of? And if it doesn't pop up to your head, I'll tell you what I'm thinking.
Of course, Devin Marsman.
The one I'm thinking of is, Devin Marsman is the young man in Halifax who's been missing for years, and the key suspect was his older cousin, who was the last guy with him. They had an odd relationship, but that cousin was recently arrested for Devin Marsman's murder. So that's a story that's taking place within one family that's being torn apart because one member of the family is alleged to have killed another. In Dylan's case, though, it's different because if one of the cousins killed him or all of the cousins killed him, they're all in there together. So could you imagine the effect on a family if, one guy's dead and the other three cousins are involved in it?
Yeah, it's
that's like dropping an atomic bomb on your family tree.
Right. And yeah, like loyalty means a lot to a lot of people, but I shouldn't say this case reminds me of the case that I'm thinking of, but you and I covered Misha Pavlak's case, like, I don't know, maybe a year ago. But that one, it just reminds me of it because Misha's case, there was an arrest made 17 years later. So, like, it just, yeah. That would be the best case scenario for just someone who was involved to grow up and report something. Like, we're in Canada. You can make a plea deal. You probably won't even serve any time.
And let's just talk about some what ifs. If it was a murder, there's no way one of them would have been able to do it and cover it up and hide Dylan without the other cousins knowing about it and without the police being able to find him. I don't think one of them did it and hid it from the others. So I think if one of them killed him, I think they're all aware of it and in on it in some capacity.
You'd think it would be impossible for just the chain of events that went on.
And then they're all drunk in the middle of the night, and the police are called. There's 911 calls, so neighbors are paying attention. So how do you get away with that?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's so odd. And I remember one case. Someone speculated this kid just kind of walked away from a bar, and someone on TikTok said, at the time of his disappearance, there was construction going on. What if he fell into a hole and the hole was filled and no one noticed? Maybe there was
it could happen.
Exactly, just terrible luck. But yeah, it's one of those cases where nothing makes sense, and there's you can think about it as much as you want or say, this could have happened, but there's always points to counter. I don't know.
Yeah, but just you say if Colin didn't do it, he's very unlucky. Let's just say he didn't do it. Dylan marches off, drunk and pissed off into the night, and he ends up just cutting through some yard and he falls in a hole, and it's a construction site or a well or God knows what, and he just disappears. That could happen. Yeah. And forever that family will have allegations pointed at Colin and suspicions and all this other stuff. That would be a horrible outcome. If they found Dylan and there was no foul play, oh man, that is terrible for everybody involved.
Absolutely.
But
wouldn't that be crazy?
It could happen, but it's
stranger things.
I'm assuming the police. I shouldn't assume, but I hope the police investigation included, getting security cameras from anywhere in the area to see if they, the gas station down the street, for example. Because if you can find any trace of Dylan walking, then
that's that.
That completely opens this. The reason this case, there's so much suspicion on Colin is because we don't have Dylan anywhere except fighting with Colin and then allegedly charging off out the back door. If he did, why is his wallet in the house next door? Yeah. In the yard next door?
Well, see, that's the thing. There's a reason that the people who were last seen with someone that went missing or was murdered are the automatic suspect. Like, you don't want to be the last person with someone that goes missing in like a freak accident or whatever. You don't want to be the last person with them, because that just casts suspicion on you right away. It's like being married to someone. Like, heaven forbid my husband go missing. So
Oh, okay. You left out that part. I thought you were just comparing being the last person with someone who goes missing to being married.
No.
That's not really.
No.
Marriage is not like that.
Yeah, like, heaven forbid my husband go missing. I am suspect number one, no matter what I was doing.
Yeah, and Lord knows you got motive.
Right.
Yeah, well, this case with Dylan Koshman, it's a high-profile case in Edmonton and in Canada, and I see why, because it is a true whodunit. There's a very clear suspect. There's evidence that would make you point at that suspect, but there's a lot about it that doesn't make sense. And I think during our conversation, I hope we highlight it, kind of the ups and downs of pointing your finger at Colin. And I don't know, like, even now after reading all this and going through this talk, I don't know if I could even say what I think happened. I think the obvious answer is that Colin is responsible, but that's not the easy answer because it just doesn't make sense.
Right. And it could all boil down to lackluster police work.
I think whatever the outcome is, I have a feeling that the lackluster police work is mixed up in it. I think that 911 call, the original 911 call that brought the police there, no one was home, so they left. When the missing persons report came in days later, you would think they'd be like, whoa, we got a call to this house.
2 calls.
Like, there was a big incident. 2 calls. Maybe even more, because it's also been said that, here's one other piece of evidence that we didn't get into. When all of the craziness was happening in the house, one of the last activities on Dylan's phone was calls to his cousin Cameron, who was also in the house, which is weird.
Interesting.
But the calls weren't answered, and the reasons they weren't answered is because Cameron said he was on the phone with 911. He said he called 911 because he was worried Colin was going to attack him. And this comes from quotes that Cameron made to CBC. But in the CBC special, it didn't get into this alleged third 911 call from Cameron. So I don't know for sure if that happened. But I forget what even brought me into that. But it's very
There's
odd.
too many pieces of the puzzle missing.
Certainly. But nothing makes sense. And I think this is something where the police just need to, like, shake and rattle every limb of this tree, because it's like the whole thing is suspicious. Yeah. I don't think anyone in their right mind would read a summary of this case and be like, oh, he's probably just wandered off.
No one with more than 3 brain cells.
Well, I don't think we're going to solve this case tonight, but this is an interesting one. I'm glad you brought it to me, but I will say it's been haunting me. I've been thinking nonstop about it, and just every time I think I solved it in my head, I remember that every little bit of it seems to contradict every other bit of it. So this is a true mystery. And I hope something happens, like some development to at least make the case move, because it seeing his parents on CBC, that broke my heart. They're
like,
hurt.
This is a case where we just need, there's lots of pieces of the puzzle missing, but we just need one tip it'll be the domino effect. Like, someone has that key, and they can get things moving, and everything will start falling into place. But someone has to come forward with what they know.
Yeah, either a piece of evidence that puts Dylan somewhere other than the house later that night or the next day or something, or someone has some evidence of something that either Colin or Nick or Cameron or Nick's girlfriend said. That's probably what it's going to take. And, it hasn't happened yet, almost 20 years later. Yeah, we're going on 20 years. Yeah. And that's a long time.
2008 was 17 years ago.
No, I demand a recount.
Right? How old am I? Every time I find out how old I am, it's news to me.
200, 350. Well, actually, I have a funny story. I was celebrating what I thought was my 41st birthday not too long ago. And I got a text from someone wishing me a happy 42nd. And I was like, I'm 41. And they're like, no, you were born in 81. And I was like, looked at my phone. I opened my calendar. Then I'm like, oh, shit, I'm 42. And it's like, I literally lost a year on my birthday.
Oh. Well, after 25, they all just kind of start melting together anyway, so.
Well, let's put a bow on this one, Madeleine. We didn't solve this case, but we're not giving up. We'll try to take on something else. Maybe next week we'll find another story, because I know there's a lot going on in this country that we're going to get into.
I was going to say, I'm sure we'll find something.
I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of Nighttime. If you'd like to learn more about Dylan's disappearance, I suggest watching the CBC documentary on the case and also joining the Facebook group dedicated to advocacy for Dylan and those searching for him. I've added links to both of these resources in the episode's description. Now, with all that said, I'm going to start wrapping up this episode, but before we do, I'm going to end with thanks. First, a big thanks to Madeleine for sharing another evening with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. A shout out to Monty, Datta, who contributes the music for the series, and Linz from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides our intro and outro voiceovers. And then lastly, but most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. On the topic of support, let me thank the newest premium feed subscribers, Chloe, Katie, and Jean. We appreciate you. If anyone else would like to support the show, you can do it in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple dollars a month, and that money funds the creation of new episodes. But the premium feed will also give you access to those episodes 2 days early, get them to you ad-free, and give you access to a back catalog of episodes. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can go premium at nighttimepodcast.com/subscribe. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still support the show by sharing this episode on social media and let all your like-minded friends know why they should listen. Your support is very much appreciated. And until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.
It's devastating to lose a family member, a child. But to not have that closure of burying him and having answers to what happened to him is a torture.